The truth is, to run a successful business, you've got to have some kind of plan, a system, a strategy, something that kind of keeps you focused and moving in the right direction. You need principles to operate by that don't change, that they're durable. The thing is, the best plan, it's not the perfect plan. Right? There's only one perfect plan, and that's God's plan. And not only can we not change that plan or control that plan, we can't even really see that plan. So stop trying to make a perfect plan. You can't do it. It doesn't exist. However, the best plan is, and actually, I'm going to stop right there. I'll tell you what the best plan is in a minute. But first, what I want to do is I want to introduce the podcast. My name is Arthur Tew, and myself and my team over at Tenfold Founders are on a mission to equip faith-led entrepreneurs to build thriving trade businesses that honor God's kingdom. So I'll let you hang in there a little bit and I'll get back to it. But first, I want to let you know I am joined today by my besties, Sydney Andrus and Jay Staub, Josh Staub. Josh, Sydney, how you doing? What's going on?
Hello. Good to
Jason,
see
this
you.
feels a lot like when I was at your house around Christmas this last year and you were reading everyone the Christmas stories, all the books.
Oh, yeah. That was a good memory. And
Um,
I'll say, whenever you have a new audience, it always tends to kind of shake up your delivery a little bit. And so I think the podcast does that too, right? As much as we try to be as perfectly authentic as we possibly can be in these things, there's always a little bit of like who's that fourth person in the room? The camera.
like,
I love it. No, this is good stuff. So what's going on? What's new? What's new with clients? What's new with the family? What are you guys up to?
We've moved down to Beaufort, North Carolina for the summer,
Yeah,
which getting out
exciting.
of the Raleigh, North Carolina heat is
Mm,
quite nice. It actually
yeah,
rained the other day, which was a big change from the drought we're having. But yeah, it's
yeah.
nice.
For those of you who don't know, we're over on the East Coast, and we are in, I don't know, call it, 50-year, 100-year drought level right now. It's not fun. The weather is hot, the weather is humid, and the weather is without rain entirely. So it's been a bit of a struggle. Sydney, what's going on in Tulsa?
we've had a lot of rain. It rained all weekend. We've been finding alternative indoor things to do with our toddler. One of them has been refinishing a dresser I found on Facebook Marketplace, which has proven to be quite difficult because I don't like any paint color.
Hmm.
You
We're
sanding
getting
it all down and doing the chalk paint, doing the
Well, Teddy's doing the heavy lifting, my husband, but I am literally just there to critique and to offer no actual concepts for him to build upon to make me happy. So
Hmm.
we're right in our roles.
Yeah. Do you actually not like any of the paint colors, or are
I
you just
actually
messing with Teddy?
don't. So when you're in the paint store and then you take it home, do you all notice that there's just it's not what you thought, or maybe it's just
The
that
lighting's different, like the
yeah,
other colors in the room are different. You don't, yeah, yeah, for sure.
and it's a dark wood that we started with. So obviously paint's gonna get onto that a little different, but,
Paint's
trial and
gonna
error.
paint.
There's a corner of the dresser that's gonna be a little thicker if he doesn't fix it than the rest.
Yeah, the whole, swatch switching to try and find the right color is a pain. I feel like I'm mildly colorblind to begin with, and so it all just ends up looking the same to me, and throw up my hands and accept. So, well, good stuff. I promised a response to the opening. So again, just to recap from where we started, I talk to founders all the time who are trying to figure out how to achieve some end, and it's not that they've never considered a strategy, a plan, an operating system. If you've ever heard of EOS or Entrepreneur Operating System, the book called Traction, it's a great one. I mean, to be frank about it, it's pretty complex. It's typically more than what a small business needs. And like with a lot of other plans, I see a lot of people, they start to implement a plan and they'll implement maybe like the first two or three principles, and then they'll kind of start to cherry pick them. And then the whole thing sort of falls apart. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. Honestly, like a bad plan or a poorly implemented plan is really hardly any better than no plan. It essentially is no plan. And so selecting the plan and then sticking to it is challenging. And I think you can get hung up at any one of those steps. The first one being, what plan do you go with? And I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'll just stop there and tell you the best plan is the plan that you can get behind and you can stay behind. And I'll even get a little bit more specific. It's the best plan that you and your team can get behind and stay behind. Right. If everybody's rowing and pushing in the same direction, what you're going to do is you're going to start establishing standard operating procedures. You're going to start establishing routines. You're going to start establishing expectations. Input A yields output B. And these are the things, these knowns, these expectations that start to take the shackles off so that you're not constantly bogged down in trying to figure out what do I do next. You are instead task switching seamlessly and with intention and without having to try to figure out a problem at every single turn. This is why I say plans and strategies are crucial, right? It doesn't matter if you're in the, first year of business or if you're in your 10th year of business. If you're operating without a strategy, you are necessarily inhibiting growth. I assure you, if you don't have that operating system, you are inhibiting growth. So what I want to do is I want to talk about, again, how do we break down whether or not you need a strategy? How do we figure out what strategy actually will work for you? And again, I get that I said the best strategy is the one that you're all bought into and that you can stay bought into, but it doesn't mean that just any strategy for anybody is going to work. There's still some things that you want to talk through and consider. So again, how do you find the one that fits you, and then how do you commit to it and implement it so that the rest of your team and those around you can stick with it. So first question, just curious, Josh, Sydney, any horror stories or from personal experience or brands that you've worked with where it's clear that there's really no guiding, like there's no founding principle or operating principle that keeps the brand moving forward. And I know you have these stories. And so again, anonymity is important here.
Yeah, anonymity.
But just sort of, I want to kind of set the stage to see if maybe anybody who's listening can see themselves in some of these stories. Like, yeah, okay, that's kind of me. Spoiler alert: the first step in doing this is yourself. Do you have a strategy? Just you got to be honest with yourself, or are you seeing some of these things? Sydney, Josh, any insight or horrors that you might share on this topic?
Yeah, there's plenty.
We're like,
Uh,
One, I think, interesting talking about plans is you're either on the side of theory or on the side of action. And we talk about trying to split the difference in the right area of that. We've seen horror stories on both sides, some that basically wallow in theory and flounder and basically can't get out of their own way to stick to a plan. I mean, they plan, but change the plan before they even implement. Then alternatively, on the other side, it's folks that are just, well, wait, slow down. Let's think about what you just said. Does that align with what you said yesterday? Let's pump the brakes a little bit before we try to jump off this cliff. Definitely examples both ways, but it's hard to,
well,
yeah.
Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but let me just first off applaud your diplomacy here and not, outing a brand or getting yourself in trouble by really,
consummate politician.
yeah, no, it's good. I like it. But you do bring up actually one of the tools that we love internally, which is that, a lot of decisions are, we talk about like binary decisions, a one or a zero, a yes or a no. And so many things sort of happen on a continuum. And again, I don't want to get too far off in the weeds here, but there's this thing that we talk about between theory and action, what Josh was just talking about. And a great thing to do when you're trying to figure out where you are to benchmark yourself is ask yourself, just like Josh was saying, are you thinking about the perfect plan all the time? Are you thinking about what to do next, thinking about what you need to do next, and afraid to like take the plunge to move forward? Or are you the person who just jumps, okay, this needs to happen, I'm just going to do it and I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to be active and see if I can get myself to the next level. And you're going to be somewhere in the middle, right? Everybody's, somewhere within that. And I'll just give you a hint. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm the authority on the matter, but one of the founding principles that or core values that I've had in many of the past businesses and that I have convinced other businesses to put in place is bias towards action. I love this core value, bias towards action. So whatever plan you have, you either need to make sure that it is pulling you back from all action with no theory down to bias towards action, or if you're right in the middle or leaning towards theory, my recommendation is find the plan that's going to push you just a little more towards action. Be just a little bit more towards action. I'd rather you do something and fail than not do anything, because if you don't do anything, you're not going to learn anything. I'd much rather you fail and learn and then figure out how to like not make that mistake again and move the business forward than not fail at all because you're too worried about getting it perfect. So I love that point. That's great. Sydney, did you have anything to add there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think my mindset has always been I can't afford to stop, whatever it
Mm,
is, improving or coming up with a better plan. There's this place in Oklahoma called the Illinois River. Either of you familiar with it? It is where everyone and their dog goes to float. And I know I look like the most outdoorsy girl ever. However, I am not. And I thought being invited to this float trip, it would be, come and go 30 minutes to an hour, float on the river for a bit, and go to a Mexican restaurant and eat chips and salsa afterwards. I found out on the water that it was going to be an 8-hour float trip.
oh my gosh, an 8 hour
Well,
float trip?
I'm with people that are in
Got to
their
bring the Desitin.
20s, and I'm not, and they have no food. We just have our floating
Plenty of
devices.
water.
Everyone's in swimsuits, no sunscreen. I'm pale and no food.
Are you sure it wasn't like the Trail of Tears that you were on?
I
It's like the Bataan Death March, maybe not so much a float trip.
Everyone else was so excited, and I was doing that. I was doomsdaying it. I was like, we're gonna die out here. And at a certain point in the float trip, somebody cut their foot open on a rock, and I threw everyone on this float, and I made everyone use their arms to paddle, and we turned that 8-hour float trip into a 6-hour one. But I'm cranky, I'm annoyed, biting everyone's
Good
heads
job.
off. And for me, not having the plan is what turned that day into a terrible memory for everyone else and myself, but also such a learning moment. Because if you literally are with a group of people that you don't share the same value system with, you sometimes aren't going to get anywhere. Because I
Yeah.
valued being in an air conditioned Mexican restaurant eating chips and salsa, and they valued getting, not like sloshed, but enjoying themselves on the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
it's not something that I found to be fun.
Well, I want to make two observations based on the story. The first is that when implementing a plan, again, I guess this is going to be a theme, but skipping ahead, the implementation piece, make sure that everybody on the team knows the intended outcome. There's no point in having a plan to get to nowhere or to get to like different places. You can't both say that we're going to count, you know, from, one, we're going to count numerically and I'm going to end up at 5 and you're going to end up at purple. Like it's not gonna work. You have to end up at the same place and put that plan together. So rule number one, right? Like as you get to implementation, make sure the outcome is known and shared, like everybody knows where they're going.
Mhm.
The other observation is an observation about you, Sydney, which is just that, well, I think you're indicating a little bit of maybe a natural bias towards the theory side, right? Like
Yeah.
you want in a float trip, I think a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, look, the river can only go to one place. It's not going to start flowing uphill. The plan, we're going to get in it and then we're going to end up here. And you're like, no, we need to end up there being nourished. We need to end up there being, pampered and comforted and,
Not
and
injured,
like looking good.
not
Right.
injured, that was one.
Yeah. No, right. I think these are such great stories because it's already starting to highlight how dynamic plan selection and implementation actually is. And so when you get to something as complex as a business, which is much more complex than a float trip or, a hike or something like that, it just gets more complicated, right? It's more difficult, more factors, more people to consider, etc. So step one, benchmark yourself. Where are you? Okay. Step two is selecting what might be a good plan. And before we started the podcast, kind of in our pre-chat, was talking, or excuse me, Josh, you were talking about the coming up with some examples and highlighting the fact that plans don't have to be overly complex, I guess is kind of where you're going. It doesn't have to be a crazy, everything is controlled, but some things can still be left to,
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think we're in danger of getting into too much theory on just what a plan is versus talking about potentially an example of, um, hey, for business X, if you're doing this, like, hey, you should be looking 3 months out. You should be looking 6 months out or 2 years. Because plan, like you're talking about, it can be infinitely more complex. Every decision yields three other decisions that need to be made. So I think what would be helpful for me is just understanding the breadth of what we're talking about when we say quote unquote plan for this example.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there are, and I'm guilty of this. I'm probably interchanging multiple terms: plan, operating system, strategy. They all sort of feel like the same thing. Let's see if we can break down the components of what a strategy actually is or a plan actually is. It starts with the goal. So where are we trying to go? Okay, how are we going to get there? Once we understand the goal, we can ask ourselves, what within the business, what are the core kind of verticals within the business that have to be operating smoothly to get us there? And I'm just going to pause real quickly to say, this is our version of it. And again, you're going to go find some book that is going to lay it out differently. And that's okay. But for this conversation, this will at least give us an example that grounds us a little bit, right? Full disclosure, this is a wedge or a part of our Tenfold Founders framework that we use in the community to drive businesses to achieve their first $1 million year in revenue.
Well, can we just jump into that for anybody that might not be familiar with the term vertical?
Thank you. Yeah. So what are the core operating verticals in the business? What that is really looking at is, if you're to break down your business into functions. And so the ones that we normally start with and that we talk about are, you have your finance vertical. So there's obviously your business is built on cash and money. And so we want to look at what are your finances. We have your sales and marketing. So you have to pull clients in. So how do you go out and attract new clients and then convince them to use your product? Marketing and sales are a little bit different, but they can live within that one vertical. Then you have operations and admin. So it's everything from managing the phones, figuring out how to do callbacks, scheduling your teams, etc. Then you have your services, and so actually going and rendering the service. So going out and mowing the yard, installing the new component, whatever it happens to be. So those are four examples of verticals, and it's the ones that we typically focus on. So after you understand the goal, then you do the breakdown of, okay, how is my business compartmentalized or sectioned off to start working towards that goal? And once you understand that, the reality is that every part of your business, it's actually people, right? Every aspect of your business is people. So when you look at one of these corporate finance and everything else, well, there's somebody who's managing that. It could be you, could be you managing all of it, right? Could be you doing every single one of them. But there are roles, there are things that you have to do. So the next thing you want to do is define those roles. And then once you've done that, you build your standard operating procedures. So SOPs, if you haven't heard this term, it's just, how do you, the fundamental day-to-day activities that you're doing to create the desired outcomes within each one of those components of the business. And so I'll stop there. That is, if you can understand those four aspects of the business, starting with the goal, what are the components, what roles live within each one of those components, and what are the standard operating procedures. If you can build just that component, and it's bigger than that, but that would be a great example of a starting system or operating system to run your business. And you can look at that every single day, and you can put benchmarks, and you can put numbers and KPIs, and you can key performance indicators on each one of those things and make sure the business is operating smoothly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. One quick follow-up question. When you're planning it out, what time frames are you typically looking at for that? Those are all the components, and then we're looking 6 months out, 12 months out.
Yeah, another good question. So it depends on your business, depends on type of business you are. Seasonal businesses will want to consider the seasonality of the business and making sure that they're managing cash flow across the various seasons. So if you're in landscaping, for instance, and you live, in the Northeast, you're probably thinking about your business. Your summer and spring is going to be really busy. You're doing lots of things. And then maybe in the winter, you're doing maybe snow removal and ice. And so you need to look at how the natural cycles of the business run in order to figure out uh, what that outlook looks like. Now, when it comes to goals, I have a different opinion on that. Like setting the core goal that's kind of a personal thing. A lot of people talk about 5-year goals.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about 1-year goals. The thing that I would recommend is the goal that you set, make sure that it's far enough out that it is aspirational, right? Make sure that it's far out that you are targeting towards something that you can't necessarily guarantee or see the clear path to yet. So there's an aspiration, there's something to inspire you and something that you can build into as you go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. I like the aspirational piece, just like sandbagging, just putting something out there like, hey, we're going to hit it anyway. The aspirational piece forces you to get creative, and also to Sydney's point, the aspiration of getting there in 6 hours instead of 8, making sure everybody's paddling and literally in the same direction.
That's right. That is it. When we take a step back, that's one version of a system. What I want you to take away from that is that the system, again, it can look like a lot of different things. We have our version of it. You're going to be able to find a lot of other versions out there. Just make sure that when you read through the system that you can understand it, that you can articulate it, that it's something that makes sense to you. If it sounds overly complicated, it probably is. If it sounds dumb and simplistic, then it probably is. If it sounds like it doesn't reflect your worldview, it probably doesn't, right? Like our systems are going to incorporate God in them. We're going to make sure that we're staying honest to our faith in all that we do. And I think that that's a critical thing to build into your system. So don't overcomplicate that piece either. Ask yourself, is this speaking to me? And if you're getting bogged down, scratching your head, going, what is this? What is that? Like, move on. I remember my grandmother, she was a voracious reader. She read all the time. She loved these mystery books. And she had this thing where, if she started a book, it didn't matter how much she hated it. She felt like she had to finish it until she was, in about her 50s. And she finally realized that, life's pretty short. And if I get 2 chapters into a book and I like it, there's a library full of books for me to go pick another one with. And she would move on. And she enjoyed reading so much more after that. Simple anecdote, but same thing with these business books are a dime a dozen. These systems are a dime a dozen. If you start getting into one, it doesn't speak to you, just move on. Okay. Third is the implementation piece. It's all about slow, methodical implementation. So I think what a lot of people do when they try and implement new systems is they sit everybody down, they take them through a 40-slide deck, and they say, this is the system. And starting tomorrow, we're going to be using this tool and that tool. And this is how we're going to do it from now on. Everybody feels like they just got punched in the face. They have no idea how to go do that. Your head's spinning at the end of it, right? So you have to implement it slowly. So we talk a lot about stepped implementation. Our framework takes 8-9 months to implement intentionally, and you're building towards it the whole time, and you're learning, and you're slowly bringing your team into every step, and it works so much better. You're able to build habits that build habits that build habits, right? You build these habits. And then once those are firmly ensconced, you build the next set of habits, which build on the last ones, which build on the last ones. I see you shaking your head, Josh. Did you have
Just sticky is the word that
sticky?
comes to mind. Yeah, making
Yeah.
it sticky, making sure that it's more about that little bit of action every day versus one massive action that it's like a big gust of wind that moves the tree, but it's the constant wind every day where you see the trees on the beach that are kind of shaped in the dunes. It's a really niche reference if you live at the beach.
Love it.
But yeah.
Yeah, it helps with
So
accountability too. If it's something that feels achievable, you're going to hold yourself and your team more accountable to it. If it feels insurmountable and just way too great of a hill to climb, you may never climb it.
Yeah.
yes,
Or
yes.
let it slide when something doesn't happen. It's like, oh yeah, like we'll let
Yeah.
that one
And
slide and let it slide and let it slide.
backsliding is tough. Even at the gym, if you start to miss a couple of days, then you may not go, Wednesday. But getting back to what you agreed upon, having people in place that are going to hold you accountable as the leader as well, I think is also really imperative.
Yes. Yes. Too. I can't help myself. I want to go back to the goal setting real quickly. When we talk about setting aspirational goals, this is a tough thing. I want to encourage you, find someone to talk to, find people to bounce ideas off of when it comes to your goal setting. It's not an easy thing to do by yourself. I've been an entrepreneur for my entire career. I started my first company in my earliest 20s. I'm 43 now, so 20 plus years in entrepreneurship. And for almost half of that career, I was more or less anti goal setting. I just didn't like it. I couldn't
Interesting.
stand it. And I couldn't stand other people who set them. And I realized eventually that it wasn't because goals were bad. It was that people were bad at setting goals,
Yeah.
or people were setting bad goals. They were setting unachievable goals that you just couldn't do it. And so at the end of the day, you're left feeling defeated that you can't achieve what you want. And it's just totally demotivating. On the flip side, people were setting goals that you could do in your sleep. They didn't actually push anyone to do anything creative. They didn't push anyone to stretch, to learn, to grow. And so you have to find that sweet spot. And I just love the term aspiration is what we call our first phase in the framework. We call it the aspirational phase. It's not a fool's errand, right? I aspire to do this thing. It's an achievable thing, but it's something that you have to aspire to do. You have to try, right? You're going to have to change to be the aspirational version of yourself. You can't just be you the way you are today and have a different life in the future. You have to mature. And the reality is, like, you're going to change either way, but are you going to change with intention, or are you going to let the world around you remold you in the image of society, or in the image of a bad market, or in the image of a fledgling failing business, right? You don't want to do any of that. You want to take the reins. God wants you to take the reins. God wants you to live intentionally, abundantly, with great high intention. So I'm glad we brought that up. And again, sorry to go backwards, but I just think it's so important on the goal setting side to get that piece right. When you do implementation, make sure that the expectations that you're putting on yourself and your team are expectations that you can actually meet. And so you do that in a couple ways, right? You make them achievable and you make them measurable. Put some metric around it. It doesn't have to be numerically measured. Sometimes it's a yes or a no. Did you yes? Did you no? How many times did you do this thing? But make sure that you can measure it so that you can track it over time. Nothing makes an employee feel better than recognizing the fact that they hit 110% of their goal, or 100% of their goal, or 90% of their goal. Hey man, you were almost there. You hit 90% of your goal. We tracked it right here. We're here to help you see those numbers and get better. That will generate great returns. All right. So as we start to wrap up here, just a couple of quick action items. First is go be honest with yourself. Go ask yourself where you stand in this sort of spectrum of having a system, having an operating system versus not. Really simple. You probably do have more than you think. So it's okay to say, oh, I've got something going here, but write it down, write whatever you think is working, the things that you're doing consistently, the things that you consistently care about, that you wake up and think about, and start making those some of the core foundations of the operating system. The second thing that I want you to do is find metric that you can track over the next 30 to 90 days that isn't about revenue. It isn't about new clients, but it's actually about process repetitions. And so what I mean by that is, if your operating system includes, we call back every single customer 3 days after the job is complete to make sure we know how well we did, then put in the thing you're going to track 30 to 90 days and see how well you do with it. Think about it. If you can do it for 90 days, if you can do it for 60, 90 days, it's going to be part of your business. It's going to be part of that operating system. You're not going to have to think about it anymore. It's going to be muscle memory. And then you can add the next really, really good habit, or really, really good sort of cog in the machine that is your operating system. So I hope that these things are helpful, that they're useful for you all, that you can actually go and implement them. Sydney, Josh, any other closing thoughts before we end in prayer?
I think that's good. Even those action items are almost like bite-sized pieces to building that plan is perfect. Yeah.
Just
Awesome.
don't make our
Sydney?
next team retreat a float trip, please.
We'll see about that. Let's see about we
I
go up to Galax, Virginia, and and float on the New River, and it's awesome. It's
I'm not going on a float trip with Sydney if she's making me paddle for 6 hours.
yeah.
yeah, ours
Yeah.
is like an hour and a half. It was great. Okay, awesome. Either of you want to close this this week?
Yeah, I can.
Sure. Yeah, go for it, Josh.
Good deal. God, we just come before you with thanksgiving just for this fellowship and this podcast. Lord, we're grateful for this opportunity to share wisdom. Lord, just help it to reach ears where it is useful advice. Lord, help us to continue to surround ourselves with the people that are honoring your kingdom through their businesses and everything that they do and say and think. And thank you for this incredible opportunity. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. Join us at tenfoldfounders.com, and we'll be back next week with another installment of the Tenfold Founders podcast.
Let's
God bless you all. Bye
go.
bye.